In the midst of apocalyptic mayhem, we all like to think that we would be swatting every brainless zombie away like flies. But when you're stripped of any superhuman elements, what do you do then? Run. Dying Light 2, the second of what looked to be an outstanding series, had recently come along in February 2022 to give us yet another zombie survival horror to get stuck into. It's Dying Light 2 Stay Human because you spend the entire time trying to stay human, something I struggle to do when I wake up every morning. Anyway, you progress through a storyline with optional side quests that has a resemblance to MMO gameplay, in that you find yourself zoned into searching your screen for the next yellow marker to run towards all too much. The game features an open world that you backtrack through a fair bit and therefore get familiar with your surroundings, making decisions and surveying landmarks that can permanently affect the environment in your favour. The difficulty of the story is sort of defined by how much side questing and looting you do, allowing players to progress naturally in whichever way they choose. A note for co-op players is you'll have to take yourself solo through a few hours of story, depending on how much dialogue you read and how fast you are with the gameplay before you can join each other in a party. There's lots to do and it's all mapped out as a sandbox experience, so let's hear more on what the game has to offer and what it's like to play.
The concept of zombies has been around for decades, and while flesh-eating hordes of reanimated dead people have created dozens of great movies, books and games, none have really gone down the same path as Dying Light. Its day-night cycle has taken a simple concept and created a dynamic environmental gameplay mechanic, where zombies are pretty docile when the sun is up, but as soon as night falls, these slow-moving sleepy zombies turn into fanatic sprinting nutcases that will chase you through the map, meaning that you're going to have to watch your step to avoid giving your position away when darkness falls. And watching your step is all the more satisfying when you're making the most of Dying Light's main gameplay mechanic, the parkour and freestyle movement, which we'll get into more details on in a bit. First off, I'm going to go into the setting of the game to give some overall context. Dying Light 2 takes place in the open world of 2036, 15 years after an experimental virus swept the world, causing an event called the Fall. Unfortunately, this virus is immune to vaccines, but fortunately it's suppressed with ultraviolet light. So while you will be infected with an incurable, debilitating and life-threatening zombie virus that will make you want to gnaw the meat off the bones of your friends and family, this UV light will mean that you do have a great tan while you do it. You play through a walled European city called Villador, known as one of the last remaining cities on Earth. And unfortunately, humans being humans, control of the city is split into different factions, and this in a conflict means that you're going to have to contend with both fighting zombies and hostile humans. One big change from the first game seems to be the tension and threat of the night. In Dying Light 1 you really had to watch your step after dark, and if you mess up too much you're going to have some pretty significant problems. Compared to Dying Light 2, the enemies were stronger at night, and nightfall itself was darker, making the experience more tense and higher stakes. In Dying Light 2 the night is still a problem, but in no way near the same magnitude. It just adds some difficulty compared to the day. In addition, some encounters and loot areas in Dying Light 2 can only be done in the nighttime, so if you decide to venture out you'll be rewarded with some goodies along the way. Moving on to the movement in this game means that you're not limited to walking the streets like the NPCs around you. You're free to climb up pretty much anything you can see, and jump from ledge to ledge, which allows you to find loot, find secret areas, power up windmills to help the people of the world around you, or simply to protect yourself from zombies trying to eat your brains. For the most part, the movement system works really well. When you get the hang of how far you can jump, how far you can fall without slipping off an edge or taking damage, and when and where to place your character to make different jumps and swings, it all really comes together to create a satisfying way to get around the world. And credit where credit's due, while the game does have its issues, the devs here have done a great job at leveraging the movement to make missions and tasks more enjoyable. From free running time trials to hiding loot in difficult areas to access, you'll need to master the movement to get the most from the game, and it is an enjoyable thing to get to grips with. There are also skill trees that allow you to advance in both combat and parkour, making traversing the environment more streamlined and taking down enemies a little easier. Moving from movement to combat, the combat in Dying Light 2 is a little more in depth than the first game. Dying Light 1 was a bit of an attack button spam game, where you essentially just swing to win and don't really think about much else. Dying Light 2, however, is a little bit more in depth with parries, dodges and other mechanics that require accurate timing. The combat is actually quite fun. However, there is a difference when it comes to fighting zombies versus fighting humans. While fighting zombies, you can basically get away with just mashing the attack button. For us, the most enjoyable combat came from fighting other humans. And this basically comes from the need to get out of the way, dodge and parry their attacks, while timing your attacks to prevent them from being blocked. The human versus human combat is just a lot more in depth. Your weapons themselves will have a significant impact on how fast you swing and the motion of your attacks, so it's probably worth playing around with some different stuff to see what you like. Up to this point, most of the areas of the game have been pretty good. The combat is half decent if you balance the more complex human-to-human combat with the pretty lackluster zombie combat. The setting is quite interesting and has a lot of areas that you can explore. And the movement system, while slower than the first game, is still enjoyable and one of the fundamental draws of the overall game. However, the mission and the story are pretty average. We didn't really think it was as bad as a lot of people online have said, but it's definitely not good. It all seems a bit rushed, it's disjointed, and it's not really something that draws you into the world or immerses you into the game itself. It kinda just feels like you're going through the motions of A to B to progress through the game. The characters are pretty moody for the most part and really not that easy to connect with, and the acting, while there can be glimmers of hope, is quite poor in places.
So, where did you find out about this?
A little bird? What's it to you?
Was it a little bird? Met a broken leg?
How would you know?
Because I broke it.
Why'd you attack him?
Hubert was planning to take
I feel like this is the fakest accent I've ever heard.
Was it a little bird?
With a broken leg.
Meet
But
a
we didn't know
broken
when we needed
leg.
our first hoobie.
Overall, for a game that was advertised with a story in mind and the impact that your character has on the world around you, it really did miss the mark here. And briefly moving into the crafting system, the crafting isn't actually that bad. You're able to buy and gather a decent amount of materials to make things that you need on the fly, whether that's lockpicks, bandages, or throwing knives. The recipes for all of these can be upgraded to make them more powerful, and the system, while not that in depth, is pretty intuitive, so it's easy to use and it does add some depth and interest to the game.
It kind of feels like conceptually the game design was well thought out. As far as what you would expect, it's the complete package. It's just that the execution makes none of it stand out as anything special. Even the parkour, arguably one of its main selling points, is just not that fluid, but it does, I guess, have that more rugged sense of realism that would have been lost with a slicker parkour style. There is a good blend of gameplay ranging from stealthy missions, parkour races, rooftop chases, and gory zombie altercations. Where we felt most disappointed is the finish of the co-op feature set. Flashlights are essential in areas, particularly at nighttime, and adds to that isolated feel that it often tries to push on you. The problem is you seem to be blind to the effects of your body's torch, losing that truly shared experience when you're searching around. To interact with many activities, you're required to be right next to each other, which for a few things makes sense. However, too many times it just creates disjointed gameplay, where someone has to drop what they're doing in order to participate in it. As far as co-op RPG feel, it seems like you both play as the same character, where the party leader gets all the spoils from the adventures. The quest completion and progress is only for the party leader, and dialogue options are also ultimately picked by them, although the co-op buddy can suggest an option if they get one in quick enough. The parkour mechanics were solid enough that the devs were clearly able to get creative on level design, and it was really fun to complete the numerous jumping puzzles throughout. The combat is almost what you make of it. There's ample opportunity to attack, block, evade, and use the environment in your favour, but I can imagine left-click spam could take you most of the way too. Let us know what you think of the game in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next one. Oh, who's this guy? Oh, I'm at the guy, by the way. Oh, what's wrong with you?